Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome to the Prince Reporters Direct, everyone. First of all, I'm going to thank all our subscribers because of whom we have been able to reach each and every corner of this country and are being able to report from several places, whether it is the coverage regarding the COVID crisis in the country, or is its security issues, or its stories related to terrorism or policing, crime. It's only and only because of our subscribers who have supported us all throughout that we are being able to go to these corners and bring to you reports from the ground. So we'll be starting the Reporters Direct, which is our only subscribers benefit that we give, and where you can speak to me directly. Currently, my name is Ananya Bharadwaj, and I am a senior assistant editor with The Print. Currently, I am in Srinagar, and I'm sorry if the internet is a little patchy because we are facing some internet trouble since I'm traveling. And in fact, all day today, I was out reporting from the ground. Currently, Kashmir, we thought was important because of the recent drone attack that happened in Jammu. And there are several encounters that are taking place on a daily basis in Kashmir, which is why we are here to report from the ground on the situation, the security situation in Kashmir, along with the COVID situation here. Just to give you a brief background of from where all I have reported in the past, say in this year, I initially, when the COVID wave started, the first wave, I was in fact in Maharashtra for over a month, reporting from there, from different places like from Mumbai, Nasik, Pune, and in fact the satellite towns of Mumbai, which included Navi Mumbai and others, reporting why these cases were on the rise in Maharashtra. So apart from Maharashtra, I had also reported extensively from UP last year on the anti-conversion law, which the UP government had brought in, and how couples, in fact, were suffering in UP because of this law. Many cases, in many instances that we saw, we found that the girls, in fact, the women, in fact, were willing to get married, to get converted. Even then, because of this anti-conversion law, their husbands were being put behind bars by the police. And there was a lot of intervention of the parents as well in the lives of these people, of these couples, who, both of whom were majors. So this is one series that was followed extensively by other media houses also that we reported on. And as I said, currently I am in Kashmir, going across, in fact, the UT to report from the ground on the situation, the security situation, these encounters that are happening along with COVID, and how well, in fact, Kashmir is doing on vaccinations, despite a tough terrain here and despite so many other odds. So I'll start taking questions from our subscribers on whatever they want to ask me about how we report, because in fact, the purpose of launching this initiative was this much, that we prepare reports, ground reports, do videos that you see, say, which you read on your laptops or you read on your mobile phones, but nobody really knows what goes behind preparing these stories or reporting on these matters. In fact, many people, when we go out, ask us that how do you approach people whom you don't know initially? Like if you are, say, if you go to a place like Kashmir and I don't belong to Kashmir, so how do you approach people and how you speak to them? How do you gather information from officials? So I am here to answer all the questions, all the things that you would like to ask me about what goes behind the scenes before we sit down to write a story that you finally see on your screens. So you can start sending us your questions. In fact, I have a few questions that have already been sent to me by our subscribers. I'll start taking them one by one. And in fact, in case you have any questions, you can just post it here and I'll be very happy to take them. So the first question here we have is from Vilas Joshi. he asks me, how does Maharashtra compare with other states in respect of management of COVID-19 and transparency of data in respect thereof? So yes, as I said that in the first wave, in the month of May, I was in Maharashtra for over a month. And the most striking part about covering COVID in Maharashtra was the transparency in data. In fact, it was amazing how these people, how the state managed data so well, because when you are dealing with a crisis like this, numbers is what matters. You cannot analyze a situation, you cannot find solutions to a problem. In fact, you won't even know how big the problem is unless you have numbers in front of you. And I think that is what helped Maharashtra contain the crisis even at that point in the first wave. So what we saw in Navi Mumbai and other places was there were call centers that were set up, there were teams, and there were war rooms, COVID war rooms that had come up at that time in Maharashtra. In fact, every place in Maharashtra, including Mumbai and Navi Mumbai, from where people were monitoring live data on their screens. So one of the war rooms that we visited was in Navi Mumbai, in fact, where a team of 7-8 people were dealing with data on every day. They were taking data from each and every hospital. Whoever gets positive in Navi Mumbai, that their name used to splash on their screens. Following that, they would just give that detail to pass on that detail to another team that used to physically track those people. So which is why contact tracing was done very well in Maharashtra. In fact, in Navi Mumbai, I saw it personally from the ground that many teams were going door to door and asking people to quarantine. In fact, people who did not have a place to quarantine themselves in their house, because the nature of housing is such in Mumbai that the houses are very small and the large number of people stay in there. So they used to shift those people to COVID care facilities. In fact, a daily report was also generated on each single person. If a person gets, say, affected in Navi Mumbai, that a separate file will be maintained for that person, that this is the date this person got positive at. These are and every day a call will go to the person in case that person is in, say, home quarantine. So it was so micromanaged, and it was done so well. The data was managed so well that which really helped them understand the problem, how big it is, and probably contain it. So data, yes, of course, is how well they maintain data really helped them deal with the problem. However, another thing that I found in Maharashtra, I think that was the case everywhere, but since I was traveling in Maharashtra, the infrastructure at that time, I think in the first wave, there was an issue of beds. In fact, in the second wave, it became worse because many more people needed oxygen and beds. But even in the first wave in Maharashtra, we found that in, say, Navi Mumbai, on one bed, 2 people were being put and given oxygen. One patient had come. In fact, I recall that when I was visiting one of the hospitals, one patient had come who could not breathe. So since there was no bed, he was asked to sit on a bench. And the next question I will take is from Mr. Kamlesh Sharma. He asks me, please, just 1 second. Yes, Mr. Kamlesh Sharma asks me, please tell us the ground situation in Kashmir, both in aftermath of the withdrawal of Article 370 and also after the PM's recent meeting with the opposition leaders of Kashmir. So yes, as I said, I am in Kashmir right now. I have been here for over a week, and we have been doing stories related to the security situation in Kashmir. In fact, we also did some stories on politics, which becomes very relevant at this time because of the meeting of the opposition leaders here in Kashmir with the Prime Minister in Delhi and the Home Minister in Delhi. Also, the Delimitation Commission visiting Kashmir and meeting these leaders, asking them what their concerns were. In fact, first, to answer the first part of your question, the ground situation in Kashmir, both in aftermath of the withdrawal of Article 370. So Article 370, it's been almost 2 years. It's going to be 2 years on the 5th of August. It happened in 2019. In fact, at that point also, I was here in Kashmir just 2 days after the abrogation happened. And let me tell you that the situation, on the ground situation is much, much better as far as the stone pelting incidents are concerned, or backlash from the locals, from the residents here in Kashmir. So let me just geographically tell you that there is an area called downtown in Kashmir, which has always been more volatile as when as far as these incidents of stone pelting are concerned. So at that point, after just days after the abrogation in 2019, when I was there were several incidents of stone pelting in the Sora region in the downtown Srinagar, in downtown Kashmir, and also in areas where Yasin Malik comes in Mysuma. So there have been there were a couple of incidents, like every second day there used to be 5-6 incidents of stone pelting. Lot of arrests were made, lot of detentions were made, but now when we see the situation after 2 years, at that time people were really angry with the government. They felt backstabbed. They said that they have taken away something that was so close to our hearts. They've taken away our identity. But when I go on the ground now, that anger, I won't say it has subsided, but yes, definitely it has diluted. So after 2 years of taking away of 370, many people tell us that practically it has not affected their lives as much. In fact, the number of bunds, the number of calls for protests have gone down. The number of incidents of stone pelting have considerably fallen. Earlier, there used to be police and CRPF, which is on the ground to maintain law and order in Kashmir, used to use a lot of pellets and a lot of tear gas shells to control the situation once the mob used to go out of hand. In fact, it used to happen, from what sources tell us, from what we get from the ground, that the situation used to get bad and the law and order used to go worse every Friday after the Friday prayers next to the Jama Masjid here. But since 2 years, since the abrogation, and since things have calmed down post that, the situation on the ground has comparatively has improved, because a lot of detentions, in fact, so in Kashmir, there are two sides to every story. One is what the cop are telling you, and the other is what the locals are telling you. And third is what you see on the ground for yourself. So the cops have been saying that the incidents of stone pelting have come down considerably, which is also the ground situation. But some of the locals in downtown are saying that there is no stone pelting happening because the police have not yet released too many people who were picked up, the stone pelters who were picked up, who were detained, who were arrested till now. So they have in fact been accusing that a lot of them are still in jails. However, this is denied by the police and the security forces. Some people have also told us that that is not the situation. In fact, the Article 370 anyway did not have much meaning to it. It was already diluted. So it has not affected practically anything in Kashmir. In fact, some people are happy that they have been able to open their shops and they have been able to do whatever the daily course that they were in fact could not do before because of the situation being so volatile in Kashmir. Now, another part to this is the increase in number of encounters in Kashmir. So in the last 3 weeks, in fact, every day there has been one encounter. Last year, in fact, 2019, post abrogation of 370, the maximum number of encounters took place in Kashmir as compared to the last 5 years. So a lot of militants from, say, Lashkar-e-Taiba, from Jaish-e-Mohammed, from this organization called TRF, which the police says is an arm of LET, have been eliminated in Kashmir. In fact, yesterday itself, an encounter took place in Pulwama. Before that, there was an encounter in Anantnag. So every day we hear that two or three people, in fact, leaders, people who are commanders of these terror outfits, are being eliminated in Kashmir every second day. And security forces say that this is one of the major steps that they have taken to send a message across to these terror outfits that they will not be tolerated. In fact, another interesting bit that I have picked up from the ground is that the infiltration from Pakistan in Kashmir has dropped considerably, although sources tell us that there are about 250 militants still operating in Kashmir, which also includes 60 to 65 of foreign terrorists. That is from Pakistan. But the infiltration has considerably stopped from Kashmir, from the borders of Pakistan into Kashmir. However, another interesting bit is that this infiltration has now increased from the Jammu sector. So it is not happening from Kashmir, from Pakistan to Kashmir directly, but happening from the Jammu sector, and then these people are reaching Kashmir. They are saying that these now they are planning to shift their focus on these tunnels that are being used by these militant groups, by these terror groups, to infiltrate into Kashmir. So that is this on as Kashmir is concerned post Article 370. Another bit I would like to add here is that locals, while interacting with them, I found are now more open to government jobs. So, in fact, the youth have been telling us that they should be opening more opportunities in government jobs for us because we want to be a part of the government jobs, because they know, they understand that the importance of a stable life, a stable income, and they want to lead a respectable life. So, this is what a major chunk of people have now been demanding, that good jobs in government sectors be provided to us. As far as this is concerned, that you need to bring normalcy to Kashmir, and this is how the Kashmiris will start, in fact, accepting the Indian state. Another part of the question was the political development. So, in fact, we met Mr. Tarigami, who's the spokesperson of the Gupkar Alliance that has been made of 5 parties, including that of Mehbooba Mufti, PDP's Mehbooba Mufti, and NC's Omar Abdullah. So we met Mr. Tarigami, and he told us that as far as Kashmir is concerned, the people are still very angry, and they feel backstabbed that the government took away Article 370. He also said that that full statehood be guaranteed Jammu and Kashmir. That is a prerequisite for a credible electoral exercise. So, in fact, that has been the stand of the Gupkar Alliance, that before any elections happen in Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir, full statehood here has to be restored, so that it at least tells people that government of India is willing to extend a hand of friendship. So they say that, in fact, people, if in case the government of India statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, this will to convey a positive message to the people that that the government of India is not here to snatch things away from them, but are also restoring what they had lost. Giving a statehood will encourage them to come out and vote in big numbers, and that is what will also instill some sort of faith, which he said has been lost. In fact, in the meeting with the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, Mr. Tarigami also told us that a lot of leaders had also put forth this demand that complete statehood be guaranteed, be given to Jammu and Kashmir before the elections. Also, one important point is the delimitation exercise. The leaders have been maintaining that the delimitation exercise has to happen with the rest of the country, that is in 2026. But, why is it that delimitation should be carried out in Jammu and Kashmir before it is carried out in the rest of the country? I mean, what is the hurry? In fact, they have been demanding this, that delimitation exercise should be carried out with the rest of the country and not exclusively for J&K right now before the election. So, another important thing related to delimitation here that we get on the ground is that people are apprehensive. They think that by delimitation, the government is going to reduce the seats of the valley and increase the seats of Jammu, which probably would get a Hindu chief minister here. And this is what the apprehension is. However, Delimitation Commission has maintained that this exercise is going to be free and fair, and which is why they are interacting with all the stakeholders. In fact, the commission was here for 2 days and met all the leaders. PDP's Mehbooba Mufti, however, skipped the meeting, but rest of the leaders met them. Met the Delimitation Commission and discussed their concerns. However, their stand remains that they are not going to contest the election in case full statehood is not restored, and Delimitation Commission goes ahead to create the new boundaries before the election is held. So this is the situation right now as far as the politics and security is concerned in Kashmir. So we have a question from Aditya Sharma, who's a student, and he again takes me back to Maharashtra. He asks, "Hi Ananya, since you had done reporting in Maharashtra and Dharavi model was in limelight recently, in your ground reporting, is that model really that good? And where do you think improvement is required? Secondly, then there's a request that he makes, Shekhar Gupta sir, through you to start extensive reporting on environmental and tribal issues. I'll definitely pass on your message to Mr. Shekhar Gupta. And as far as your question is concerned, yes, as I mentioned in the beginning of the live, that Maharashtra has been very good with data. So because data tells you what the real problem is, where it lies, because it's all objective and it's in front of you in, say, a form of Excel sheet. You know where the problem is, where the cases are rising, what you are able to just spot on, identify the problem right there objectively, and then you can find solutions. So same with Dharavi. In fact, they had adopted this strategy of testing as many number of people and pulling them out of that cluster as soon as they tested positive. I think that is what helped Dharavi and has been helping. In fact, most of the congested pockets in Maharashtra, where in fact I remember visiting some slums areas also in Maharashtra, and the same strategy was followed. Door-to-door testing. Whenever the person tested positive, you bring that person out from that place and isolate. So just test and isolate, test, track, isolate. I think Maharashtra was one of the first to start that and apply it, in fact, on the ground, which is why Dharavi could be saved. Because if you've ever been to Dharavi, you'll see it's house after house, and these are small, cramped places. And when it comes to a disease like COVID-19, a virus like COVID-19 that spreads so fast, it would have been devastating had it not been controlled. So the next question I have is from Shubham Tiwari, who asks, while reporting from the ground, how do you stay within the bounds of human condition? Don't you get distracted or rather immersed in the surroundings, or just the passage of time? I think we are all humans, and while reporting on several issues, it is very, very difficult to detach yourself from that surrounding, whether it is a place where you have gone to, say, meet a family whose loved one has just died, or if it is a doctor you are speaking to in say, during COVID times, COVID reporting, a doctor that you're speaking to whose patients are dying one after the other. So it obviously, when you're in that situation and everything is just, and you're in that situation, you have to look at everything objectively, because you can't let yourself get carried away at that point of time. It happens many times that you get carried away, you get emotional. But then as a reporter, I think it comes with time, this sensitivity to deal with things and still remain detached. So this is what we practice. In fact, this is what comes with experience. Whenever you go to a place like this, whether you are reporting from a conflict area like Kashmir, where like, for instance, I went to do a story to meet a family in which an alleged militant had been killed. The security forces have claimed that this boy from Kulgam had just joined the resistant front, which is an arm of LET. So he had just joined the terrorist and he got killed in an encounter. Now his family has been claiming, they were crying and they were claiming that this boy was not a terrorist. In fact, he was just showing way to some people who were terrorists, and probably some police informers saw him with the terrorist and informed the police about him, and he also got killed when the security forces cordoned off the area to corner the terrorists. So, I mean, when you're in a situation like this, it is very difficult to be objective and to look at things not in an emotional way, and also present facts in a way that doesn't mislead. So, of course, it is very difficult to do that. But then, as I said, it comes with experience. Whenever you're going to a place like a hospital and you're seeing dead bodies all over, you are seeing that people are suffering, and then also you have to pick up details from the ground. It sometimes borders on being insensitive also, but then you have to do your job because that's your job. You have to show the people what's happening. In fact, we are the eyes, we are the ears who are on the ground for others to see. So we are the ones who are actually picking up instances, picking up these details from the ground. I'll take the next question. This is from Aman Brar. He asks, reporting on ground, do you meet people who have positive outlook towards India rather than the extremist views we see in media towards India from Kashmir? Yes, definitely. Definitely. You do see people who have a positive outlook towards the country. In fact, as I mentioned in my first answer, when while answering one of the questions related to Kashmir, was that people, in fact, here want to move on. There is a section of people who say that they want jobs in the government sector. In fact, they want to carry on. They want this conflict to end because it has taken away a lot of their years, their prime years of working, of their youth. So, of course, it's not that in Kashmir everybody is against the government of India or everybody is against the current dispensation. However, yes, there definitely is this general perception about being ditched, about being not heard, about being backstabbed. That is because when the way the Article 370 was abrogated, so many of the political leaders here were put under detention. They were arrested. In fact, many of them were arrested for over a year. There were so many restrictions. There was increased security number of deployment in the valley. Not open, the markets could not open. The general perception, just imagine being in a place where you open your window and all you see is deployment of security forces. I think that is what has left a bad impact. That is what has led the people of Kashmir to be this general impression of not having any faith or not trust the current dispensation or the Indian state. However, it is not the case that everybody talks against India or wants to say go to Pakistan, which is a general perception. For some reason, it is not like that at all. The next question here is from Vishwanathan KL. He asks, Ananya, have you or the print ever felt and discussed that there's an over coverage of Kashmir security, terrorism, and politics in the Indian media? The unbridled coverage by the media, which I fear is a result of fear of missing out, is uncannily being exploited by the forces inimical to the nation's cause. Do we require to exercise more caution here? Yes, of course. As I said, reporting from any conflict area, one has to be extremely cautious and responsible at the same time. Be as effective as you can without getting away from the side, the police side, or from what you hear from the locals. So you really have to be clinical. You really have to be objective while reporting from these areas. When you say that it has been that too much coverage of Kashmir security, terrorism, and politics, too many stories are unfolding here on a daily basis. It is internationally, it is relevant. So it is important for reporters to be on the ground and report what the truth is. Also, why it is important to report from this area is because of too much misinformation being peddled, too much propaganda from either sides being peddled. So it is very important that whichever organization is reporting from this place is on the ground and just reporting facts so that the true picture comes out, the true picture is reflected. It can't be completely ignored and should not be ignored because it's a very, very relevant area. The politics is very relevant. The people, the situation is very relevant. In fact, after 370, it became even more relevant. It has to be in the news because, as I spoke about, these constant infiltrations that are happening, the constant attacks, the constant these encounters that are happening. So both sides have to be reported. All sides have to be reported in as objective way as it can. And of course, people tend to get carried away in a place like this because, as I said, too much information is doing rounds. So one has to be very objective in reporting while reporting from Kashmir, which is an extremely sensitive area, and covers extremely sensitive topics like security and terrorism. In fact, some positive stories also should be reported. In fact, when it comes to Kashmir, whether it is stories on development, whether it is stories on initiatives, like currently the vaccination drive in Kashmir is doing excellently. In fact, the Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha has given out directions to all its officers, that the vaccination should be carried out at full blast. So, from what we gathered from the ground is that each district, in fact, had a competition thoughts on how to vaccinate maximum number of people in their respective districts, and this is despite having so much hesitancy initially. These Kashmir being a border state, where, as I said, that too much misinformation is always doing the round. These on social media, there were too many theories about how the vaccine is not good, how it leads to infertility, how it leads to sterilization. So, but despite that, in fact, South Kashmir, where which is considered to be militant infested, other backward areas, despite odds like terrain difficulties, Kashmir has been successfully able to vaccinate over 70% of its people. So that's a big achievement, I think, and needs to be highlighted. Just one, another question I have is from Ravi Indran. He says, what is a difficult situation in your journalist career? That's a very difficult question, in fact, because since we report from the ground, and when you are going to places, you really don't know what you're going to encounter. There are several situations that come, and you have to quickly think on your feet and take a decision. Difficult situations are different, say when you're reporting from the ground, or when you're sitting, say, with your trying to build a network among, say, government officials. Sometimes there are difficulties in getting the scoop out or getting information out that can be that will be my exclusive information. So there's a lot of competition for that. So that is one difficulty. Secondly, on the ground, you never know what you're going to inquire. On the ground, you never know what you're going to encounter. So, like for instance, in Kashmir, when I was reporting during the after the abrogation of 370 in 2019, there was a lot of, as I said, mistrust in people as far as the media is concerned. So whenever a reporter used to venture on the ground, in fact, the people used to get a little hostile because they thought that you belong to the Godi media. They said, you are the Indian state media, you don't report about the sufferings that we go through, you don't report about what we go through here, and you are just going to propagate and peddle the government's agenda. So that's a very difficult situation to be in, because you are on the ground, you're vulnerable, and you don't know how the general public is going to react. However, let me add here that although it was difficult to convince people that we are going to report objectively on everything, in fact, we are going to, why we are there, we convince them that we are on the ground so that we can also put your voice out there, so that people hear you, so that your side of the story also comes out. Sometimes it gets difficult to convince them. But let me tell you that as a journalist, as a reporter, whenever I have tried to reason with people, whenever I have tried to initiate a dialogue, it has always worked. Whether it is some family that I'm trying to speak to who has lost his or her loved one, or people in Kashmir who were really angry at that time, and who had a lot of mistrust even in the media, it has always worked. The dialogue has always worked. Speaking to them always works, and they get convinced, because after all, they're all people. So this is what I think the main quality a journalist should have, or as a reporter, I feel must have, is the ability to convince the other person to talk to you. Because unless that person talks to you, you really don't know what is the other side of the story, which is very important. Because if I just report what the police are saying, what the security forces are saying, completely ignoring the other side, then I fail as a journalist. So that is one difficulty that you feel as a reporter, or you face as a reporter, is to convince people to talk, to open up to you and tell you the real story. The next question I have is from Elbin George, who says, how do you obtain death statistics from central and state governments? So yes, this is an interesting question. In fact, my area of reporting is security. I cover the Ministry of Home Affairs. I had never covered health before, but since COVID was the big story, I started out going to these states that were suffering. So the first assignment, as I said, was in Maharashtra, and when I landed in Navi Mumbai, all these death statistics are in the center are with the Union Home Ministry and in state governments in respective health departments. So first a report on what needs to be done is to see which are the relevant people that you got to meet, whether it is the chief medical officer of that place, or is it the DM of that place, or is it the really going in and looking at the patients, looking at cases, the experts, the medical experts. So for data, we usually, for every district, we rely on the CMOs, which is the chief medical officers at the district hospital in that area. So they maintain all the data in the states, where you can, in fact, get a comparative data also of different districts in this. For instance, I was recently, in fact, just before this trip, I was covering COVID in Punjab and Haryana. And in one of the vaccination stories, while I was in Chandigarh, I had met the district commissioner in Mohali, who gave me comparative data of how Mohali has done extremely well as far as vaccinations are concerned. However, other districts in Punjab are lagging behind. So these are data that you will get with all the health officials, the concerned officers, whether it's the district commissioners or as I said, the chief medical officers of the concerned areas, the concerned districts. The next question is from P.V. Rao. He asks how the events happening in the last 18 months affecting the education system of Kashmir, especially for secondary and college education. Yes, Kashmir, as far as Kashmir is concerned, this has always been an issue. And I feel that it is very, very unfortunate for the people here. In fact, before COVID struck, after COVID happened, it affected each and every state equally. But before COVID, I will go back again to the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019. During that point, the internet was snapped, and for over a year, it remained. It was not restored. So it was not just the people who are into business, who are into IT sectors, banking, who were affected, but the students. In fact, we had done a story, I remember, when many students had to apply for different examinations, competitive exams, and were suffering because there was no internet. Outside the district commissioner's office in Srinagar, there used to be a long queue of people who wanted internet. There used to be 3-4 phone lines at that time at the DC office, and there used to be one computer which was available with internet, and everybody used to flock to the office, requesting officials to help them, say, either send emails or complete their applications. Many people who could afford also flew to Delhi to do that. However, not obviously many people can afford that. So yes, it was very unfortunate for people here in Kashmir. And in fact, that after that COVID happened, and the classes started online. However, here the internet is snapped every second day whenever there's an encounter that is happening in say for instance, the last encounter happened in Pulwama. So the internet connections were snapped. So it is not the internet connections are snapped so that misinformation doesn't go out, messages are not circulated. Say people who would sympathize with the militants who may be hiding in some place, the information doesn't reach them. So internet is snapped for security purposes. However, it starts affecting the local population as well. People who are, say, having their classes online, people who are whose entire work from home or work depends on the internet, that suffers. It is an issue currently in many places, but more so in Kashmir because of these reasons. Another part of the question is, one is education, and the other is effect of events happening in Afghanistan on Kashmir, either direct or indirect. So it is very, very early to say anything as of now. However, it would be wrong to say that the intelligence agencies, which have a significant presence in Kashmir, are not monitoring the situation closely. Of course, they are monitoring the situation closely. In fact, there were a lot of rumors of infiltration starting again from Kashmir. Many people going to Afghanistan more for training now. Presence of the Taliban in the valley. So these were a lot of rumors that were doing the rounds, of course, because of the developments happening in Afghanistan. And as security forces tell us, sources in intelligence tell us that it is too early for something to show on the ground as of now. However, they also told us that the situation in Kashmir might change. Something might happen in, say, the next 2 years, depending on how things pan out. They are on the guard. In fact, they said that we are on high alert. But on the ground, as of now, the last question I'll take is, it's a third part. Is there real investment happening in Kashmir and Jammu as expected, as told at the time of repeal of Article 370? So that's a very good question. And that's the last question that I'll take for this session. In fact, we did a follow-up on the developmental projects that were announced at the time of 370. Nothing much, in fact, has happened on the ground as far as the projects are concerned. These are all old projects that still remain in pipeline. In fact, another promise that was made by the then LG of Kashmir, Mr. Satyapal Malik, that there'll be 50,000 job openings and many people in Kashmir will get jobs. Even those have not been fulfilled. There are a lot of vacancies still that remain. And it is not that people do not want to take up jobs, but there are some administrative issues that officers tell us are coming in way. And as far as the development in Kashmir is concerned, at that time, we heard that an investors summit will be held in Kashmir, where investors will be called from outside to invest in Kashmir. That too has not happened. However, officials blame COVID-19 for that. In fact, they said that as soon as things started to get normalized, as soon as the ball started rolling, COVID-19 struck, and that is what delayed most of the projects, most of the initiatives that were announced at that time. So the situation, however, remains. As far as the development is concerned, the projects or anything on the ground, concrete on the ground is concerned, we have. However, officials tell us that the things are in pipeline. Kashmir is still dealing with COVID-19 cases, and as soon as things become normalcy returns, those projects will start in full swing. So we'll wrap up this session. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining and asking these questions. Please stay tuned for our ground reports from Kashmir that we'll be working on, that I'm working and will be reporting in due course. You can also hit the join button on our YouTube, which is especially for our subscribers, for easy access to our key videos.